Hello, dear children. I welcome you to this English class. Today, we shall continue with chapter number 1, Meeting Cezanne by Michael Morpurgo. We have done part A of this chapter in the previous class, and today we shall continue with part B. So, let's begin. Meeting Cezanne by Michael Morpurgo, Part B. Before we begin, I would like to take a short recap of what we have discussed in the previous class. So students, do you remember who is the main character in this lesson? There's this little boy who has come to stay at his uncle's place. Do you remember the name of that boy and his uncle? The boy's name is Yannick, and that's Uncle Bruno. And also, do you remember there is a visitor who comes at their inn? He is a famous artist who leaves a drawing on one of the paper tablecloths. And Yannick tries to clear the table, and while he's doing so, he picks the paper cloth, crumples it in his hand and throws it in the fireplace. And Amadine goes rushing to get the paper out of the fire with a pair of tongs. But she is too late because the paper has already started burning. Now she is upset with Yannick because she wanted that particular sketch, and now she is very upset with Yannick. So she shouts at him and she says, "You little fool." And suddenly, what happens? There is silence in the restaurant and they stop eating. Now this alerts Uncle Bruno, so he comes rushing towards them, and then he asks Amadine what has happened. Now I shall read. So I want you to follow the text in your textbook, or you can follow the text that you can see on the screen. Now read along with me. Everyone in the restaurant stopped eating and went silent. Then Uncle Bruno came striding towards us, unlike his jolly self. "What is it?" he asked Amadine. "It was Yannick, Papa," she cried. "He threw it in the fire. The tablecloth. The drawing." So now Uncle Bruno asks Amadine, "Why are you shouting at him?" So then she cries. She's saying, "Papa, it was Yannick. He threw the drawing into the fire." Okay. So now that is what now she's explaining to her dad. Now let's continue. "Did you tell him about it, Amadine?" Uncle Bruno asked. "Did Yannick know that he sketches something on the tablecloth and leaves it behind for us?" So now Uncle Bruno is asking Amadine, does Yannick know that that visitor is a famous artist and he always leaves a sketch behind for us? So let's see what Amadine replies. "Amadine looked at me, her cheeks wet with tears. I thought she was going to lie, but she didn't." Now Yannick thinks that Amadine is going to lie, but she tells the truth. "No, Papa," she said, lowering her head. So now she says, no, Papa, she had not told Yannick that visitor is a famous artist. So now let's see what Uncle says. "Then you shouldn't blame him, should you, for something that was your fault? Say sorry to Yannick now." So Uncle Bruno is a fair person. He's being fair. So he's saying it is not Yannick's fault. It is your fault. You have not informed him that he is a famous artist. Had he known, he wouldn't have thrown that sketch in the fire. So it is your fault. So now you have to say sorry to Yannick. She mumbled but didn't raise her eyes. So she mumbled, meaning she doesn't say sorry clearly because she's still upset, and besides her father is also angry with her. So she's upset, and so she doesn't say sorry clearly. She also doesn't raise her eyes. Okay, you can see there all three of them in a conversation, and Amadine is very upset. Let's read. Uncle Bruno put his arms around me. Never mind, Yannick, he said. Now he sees Yannick is very sad. He's very sad that Amadine he has thrown that particular sketch in the fire, and Amadine is crying over it. So he's very sad. So now Uncle Bruno puts his arms around him. So he wants to comfort him. He wants to comfort the little boy. So he says, do not mind, never mind, Yannick. He said he particularly liked his creme brulee. You made it, didn't you? So the drawing was for you. Really. Always look on the bright side. So what is he saying? He's saying that, see, just think that famous artist, he has liked that creme brulee which you had prepared. Can you imagine? He liked that dessert that you had prepared. Also, the drawing was for you. So for a moment, even though it was a short while, you held the painting of a greatest painter in the world. So do not despair, do not feel bad. Okay, it's a great moment you will never forget. So always look on the bright side. So what he means to say, don't feel upset over things that cannot be undone. Always look on the bright side, think positively. So that's, see, there you can see he's putting his arms around Yannick, trying to comfort him. Later on, as I came out to the bathroom, I heard Amadine crying in a room. I hated to hear her cry, so I knocked on the door and went in. Okay. So he rushes. Now later, Yannick goes to Amadine's room just to tell her sorry. But then he can hear her crying, so he knocks at the door and enters. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean to upset you. Who's saying this? Yannick. She had stopped crying by now. It wasn't your fault, Yannick, she said. So Amadine says, it wasn't your fault. Still sniffling a bit, means still sobbing, she's still crying. It's just that I hate it when Papa's cross with me. So why is she crying? Not because the paper was thrown in the fire, but because Papa is angry with her. Okay, and he hardly ever is. He hardly is angry with Amadine. So that's why today when he was angry with her, so that made Amadine feel very bad. He hardly ever is, and only when I have done something really bad. I shouldn't have blamed you. So Amadine accepts her fault. She says, I shouldn't have blamed you. It was my fault and I'm sorry. Then she smiled at me. So she smiles at Yannick. Okay. So here it is. First she's sad, but then later on she smiles and she accepts her fault. I lay awake all night, my mind racing. Somehow I was going to make it all right again and make Amadine happy. Soon I had worked out exactly what and how to do it, even what I was going to say when the time came. Now what Yannick is trying to think of a plan, is devising a plan to undo the things, meaning something he has planned which we will know later on. Okay, so the poor little boy, he wants to make Amadine happy once again. You can see him thinking deeply in thought, thinking of a plan. Next morning, I didn't go for my walk in the hills, but made my way down through the village towards a chateau. I waited till there was no one about. I climbed the gates easily enough and ran through the trees. Okay, so now next morning, he normally goes for a walk in the hills, but the next morning he didn't go for a walk, but he went towards the chateau where that visitor lived. Okay, so there you can see him climbing the gate. He looks around if anybody is there and then he climbs over. Now after he has climbed over, he enters a compound and let's see what he sees. There, surrounded by the vast and threatening forest on all sides, was the old man with very little hair who had come to the inn. He was sitting alone on the steps in the sunshine and sketching. Now, what does he see? That the old man, that visitor, was sitting there. He's surrounded by trees on all sides and is sketching. Okay, so early morning is sitting there and is sketching. He's sketching the landscape, the beautiful scenery that he is seeing. I approached as silently as I could, but somehow I must have disturbed him. He looked up, shading his eyes against the sun. So Yannick silently goes and stands behind the artist. He stands behind the artist. He doesn't want to disturb him because he's sketching. But that old man understands that there's somebody behind. So he turns around and he greets him. He says, "Hello, young man." Now that I was this close to him, I could see he was indeed very old. So Yannick observes. Now since he's very close to him, he makes an observation that he is very old. Okay. But at the same time, he also notices that visitor's eyes were young, bright and searching. Okay. Now what does it mean? That even though he is old, yet he is still, his eyes are young. In the sense, he likes to watch nature, he likes to see things around and put it in a sketch. He is not fed up of things that are seen even though he is old. He likes to marvel at nature and he tries to put it in a sketch. Okay, and his eyes are bright, is kind, okay, and loving. So you can see here. Okay, so that's Yannick trying to go closer silently, but the old man realizes and then he greets him. Now let's see what happens. We will see this in the next part, that is part C, when we take up in the next session. Meantime, I would like you to go through the meanings. Striding means walking. To look on the bright side means to look for good things even in a bad situation. I want you to learn these meanings. To be cross means to be angry. When the time came means at the right time. So students, we have completed part B of chapter 1, meeting Cezanne, and next time we shall continue the last part, that is part C. Fine. I hope you have understood whatever I have explained today.